Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Rumble. This week we are going to be discussing issue number 4 of the Warhammer 40K Combat Patrol Magazine. This is our first paint issue, and where we get 3 paints: Macragge Blue, Bracknar Burgundy, and Wraithbone, as well as a starter brush to use with the paints. Now, these 3 are base paints, which means they are the base coats you're going to use on your model. However, both Wraithbone and Macragge Blue come in a spray can. So that is what I'm going to be using for these. Let's go over the magazine. As it is a paint issue, it tells you how to set up your paint. You've got your paints, your water pot, brush, paper towel for cleaning it off, your magazines, which will tell you how to paint, your individual models, such as the Captain in Terminator armor, a pad for mixing paints, and telling you that comfort is key. You have to be comfortable when you're painting. It's not something to do when you're uncomfortable. And of course, the magazine comes apart for ease of storage later. We have a binder coming. So it talks about your water pots. You've got your standard coffee mug that a lot of people use, but you can get that confused with your coffee or tea or something else you're wanting to drink. I recommend you buy the Citadel paint water pot from the Warhammer store. Very useful. You really can't confuse it for a cup to drink. This palette pad is also purchased from Warhammer, or you can use a plate or something else. There are myriad of palette pads that you can use or buy. You've got your various brushes. You've got your starter brush. As I said, it's not the greatest brush, but it is something to get you on. You've got a base brush, dry brush, layer brush, and then your texture tool. We'll learn about the texture tool later on when we start texturing our bases. Same with the dry brush and layer brush options. Now, all these are the synthetic brushes that you can tell because they're white. The starter brush is a natural brush, and they make base, dry, and layer brushes with natural hair. They are black. And we talk about the paint technique, applying paints and undercoating. So you will use your base paints for your undercoat, and get some paint on the brush, put it on the palette pad. Thin out your paints. These are very, very thick paints, and they will get in all the nooks and crannies and the recesses of your model if you don't thin them out. Add a little bit of water on your brush, thin your paint out with it on the palette pad. Then you begin undercoating and base coating the model. Teaches you how to do it. Now they have you holding the model by the base or elsewhere on the model, which you can do. It's not very easy to be using your paintbrush when you're holding the base, because you have to do this and move everything around. Games Workshop makes a handle that you can use. This is the smallest one, and it is for smaller models. It expands, but not that far. The Space Marine Captain in Terminator armor actually has too big of a base to use that particular handle, which is why there's a bigger one for larger models, and it expands much further. Additionally, for using spray paints, Games Workshop makes a spray handle that you can put up to 10 models on, depending on their size, and spray coat them from every angle easily. We then get into the how to paint section, which tells you to base coat your Space Marines in Macragge Blue. I am going to be spray painting them, using the spray paint. First coat, let 5 minutes to dry. Second coat, 5 minutes to dry. Third coat, 5 minutes to dry. Cleaning your brush between each coat and changing out your water as needed. And you will be base coating the Tyranids in Wraithbone. The issue, when you're done, your Marines will be blue and your Tyranids will be an off-white. I will show you them when I paint them. I'll show you the results after we get done going through the magazine. Bonds of Honor is a story about the lore of the Space Marines. Here we have a preview of some of our future models, the Chaplain on the bike and the Librarian in Terminator armor. And we have some lore and naming conventions on all of those characters. Same with the Tyranids. You've got your Winged Tyranid Prime and your Parasite of Mortrix, which is right there. That is another future model. And some information on those. Then we get to our play section and our desperate measures. Having expended their ammunition against the Tyranid hordes, a squad of Infernus Marines makes its way back to their base. However, on the way, they're ambushed by a squad of Von Rein's Leapers. The only way forward is through desperate hand-to-hand combat as they pit brute strength against the speed and ferocity of the Tyranids. Tells us to gather our data sheets. We got those last week in issue number 3. This gives us all the information we need to fight these units. Shows us how to set it up and the various turns, either the Space Marine turn or the Tyranid turn. We then get some information on the data sheets themselves, and you can download them for free at Warhammer Community website, or buy them if you prefer a hard copy. You get all our information on the data sheets. Tells us what everything means, with ballistic skill, weapon skill, strength, damage, keywords, everything. And our attack sequences, how hit rolls, torrent, etc. works, wound rolls, saving throws, and damage. So you can go through the battle properly using all the rules. Finally, we have an overview of the Combat Patrol, including the paints and the brushes we will be receiving, as well as some wound markers that you can cut out. Next week, we will be going over issue number 5 and the Infernus Marine Sergeant. Following week, we have 5 Bargrunts in issue number 6. Talking about, so, we'll also receive some dice next week. I will now go and paint the models and show you how they look fully base coated using spray. I will be right back. All right, here we go. As you can see, I have them all based, the Space Marines in Macragge Blue and the Tyranids in Wraithbone. Now, as I mentioned before, I prefer to base, especially when they're common colors like that, in spray paint. You can use the Macragge Blue to paint your Space Marines or any of the other colors for the chapters. Or you can grab yourself a can of Macragge blue paint. Pretty easy to do some basing. They're not overly difficult, especially if you use spray paint. You just have to be careful not to have too much overspray or buildup. Especially in areas with, there's some spaces like you can see here that got missed, but that's going to be a different color later, so it really doesn't matter. If there's a spot blocking, spray doesn't really get to it, so you'll need to do touch-ups with the actual base paint, whether it is Macragge blue or Wraithbone. Now, I do a lot of basing in Chaos Black. That really makes the colors pop. If you're doing, say, something with a lot of silver, you can base in Lead Belcher. If you're doing Stormcasts, you can do it in Retribution Armor. You can also, for highlights, if you're using a bunch of contrast paints, you can base in White Scar. If you're doing a bunch of Hobgrots or Cadians or something, you can base in Xandri Dust. There are a number of other colors that are available in the sprays. But for this case, we have Macragge blue and Wraithbone, which are the two of the colors we get. We also got Bracknar Burgundy. That will be highlighting primarily on the Tyranids in this area next week. So next week we have more paint guides on how to paint these further. Additionally, next week we get the Infernus Marine Sergeant, followed by 5 Bargonts. Now the Infernus Marine Sergeant will be a replacement for this model here. So because this is the sergeant for this squad, that is a specific sculpt for that sergeant. So you can paint this one up to look like that one, but in a squad of Infernus Marines, that replaces this. Thank you for joining us on the Warhammer Rumble. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment, and I will answer any questions you may have about the Combat Patrol, Warhammer in general, or paints. I will see you all next week, and have a wonderful day.